Hello and welcome everyone to our Seifried tasting this evening. I'm very privileged to have Dan, our New Zealand wine buyer, and Seifried's European market manager, Maria Reardon, with us this evening with the first taste of the 2020 Split Rock Sauvignon. I do hope some of you were able to purchase some of the wines this evening. We'll be interested to know what you're drinking. All that's left for me to say is bear with us. Any technical issues, we'll do our best to get back on track. But I'll hand over now to Dan and Marie.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to join you this evening. Marie and I are going to talk through some of the wines. Marie is the Seifried subject matter expert, and I'm, as Rachel said, the New Zealand wine buyer. So together we're going to chat through some of the wines and tell you, and Marie's going to tell you a bit about the winery.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope we can have some fun this evening. We've been greatly missing seeing everybody at live events this year, but this is the next best thing. So we all need a little bit of cheer in our lives right now, don't we? So we've got wine and Seifried, including the 2020 Sauvignon Blanc. But let's just tell you a little bit about Seifried, the family and the estate, before we kick off with the wines. So Seifried Estate it was actually the first commercial winery on New Zealand South Island. We're situated Nelson, right at the very top of the South Island, and we go back to 1973 when the vines. From he grew up with a family of fruit growers, and he went in the 60s. He went off to Germany to Weinsberg University and learnt viticulture. And from there, he went to South Africa and worked for the KWV, making wine for them. Then in 1970, applied for a job with the apple and pear to make fruit wine. So he arrived in New Zealand at New Year 71 and started to work there. Shortly afterwards, he met a lady called Agnes, a local school teacher, and they met on the ski slopes, fell in love, and were married by the end of the year. By this stage, Herman was getting sort of slightly itchy feet and really kind of wanted to make proper wine from grapes, not fruit. And he felt that Nelson was a really, really good area for growing grapes, and couldn't really understand why nobody was doing that there, because there's an abundance of fruit in the area. There still is, you know, it's a very big fruit production area, apples, kiwis, and so forth, and also hops for beer. But nobody was growing fruit there and was growing grapes there, and all the experts kind of said, don't be silly, go to the North Island, and grapes on the South Island, it's too cool. But Herman thought otherwise and eventually managed to secure some funding. And in 73, Agnes and Herman planted their first grapes, and with the first vintage was in 76. And that wasn't Sauvignon Blanc. Everybody thinks Sauvignon Blanc has been in New Zealand forever and a day, but actually it was somewhat maybe old-fashioned grapes now, like Mulvana, also some Riesling and some Chardonnay and Refosco, an Italian grape. Roll forward a great many years. The Seifrieds now have their 3 adult children involved in the business, and winemaking, Chris and Heidi, and Anna, sales and marketing, very much a family enterprise, and largest winery in Nelson. So Chris and Heidi are responsible for the winemaking. Heidi is also a dentist and still practices 1 day a week. And Anna looks up and the domestic sales. And Herman still gets a bit involved with winemaking, but spends quite a lot of his time now really. We've got over 320 hectares of sustainable vines now spread across 10 different vineyards. So quite a lot of fruit to look after there. And Agnes is also still very much on board with working in the office and running the office. So we've been working with Laithwaites now for about 15 years, I think, Dan. Must be
Yeah, I
something
was
like
going to
that.
ask you actually. I think I was going to say definitely more than 10, but yeah,
Yes.
15 sounds about, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was 2005, and actually we started working with a Riesling. Split Rock Riesling was the first wine, and then we did the Sauvignon the next year for you. So, and of course the Split Rock Riesling is still in the business, so we're not tasting it here today, but that's still around
and still delicious.
So, yeah, that was way back. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a journey, but you know, Split Rock I think has established itself as an important brand with Laithwaite's customers. And they really seem to love the wine.
And if I can just jump in, Marie, you know, and you're talking about the family there. That's something that that is very important to us as well. The Laithwaite's family, Tony and the family, started the business working with other winemaking families, and that's still the model in the business and the way we like to operate today. And so I think this is a really good example of two families working together, and 15 years go by and two families are still working together with the next generation. And I'm sure, you know, the kids of the Seifried family will come along and we'll continue to work with them. So it's a really good example of when something is working, it can go for a long time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, we really treasure our relationships with them. And now the kids involved too, and yeah, that does mean a lot, really. It's a nice link to have, I think, to be working with other families rather than sort of massive conglomerates. So yeah, and gosh, 15 years, that's quite a while, isn't it? So I guess we should maybe have a little look at some of the wines now. Okay, so this is perhaps one of the most iconic labels I've ever seen, actually. There we have Tony and yourself, Dan, and Chris, our winemaker, jumping around on the rock. When was that? That must be 5 or 6 years ago now, I guess, when you came out.
That was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I distinctly remember that morning when I picked Tony up, and Barbara, Tony's wife, was with me and said, look after Tony. And then as we were getting off the boat, climbing onto the rock, I just had those words in my head, and I thought, I am not going to be very popular with Barbara, and that's quite important to be popular with the Laithwaite's family. So I was very cautious. So he started climbing up the rock, and I said, no. So that's why I kind of tried to get in front and climb up the rock a bit further. But no, it was a beautiful day, absolutely stunning day in a stunning part of the world. And you know, that label says it all, doesn't it? It's Split Rock.
It really does, actually. No, that was a good day. I think Chris was pretty nervous too, having Tony and yourself, making sure nothing happened to either of you. But no, it was all good fun. So yeah, so I mean, this wine just has become so successful for you, hasn't it? It's just really popular. I mean, whenever I do the live events, you know, probably 1 in every 3 people that come to the table say, oh, we've got some of that in the fridge at home, or a case of that just arrived the other day. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, there's such a loyal thing for the wines, and you know, that's really exciting that we've done that. So sorry.
It's absolutely one of our customers' favourite wines, and not just Sauvignon Blancs and not just New Zealand, but it's one of our customers' favourite wines from around the world.
Yeah.
And for very good reason. It comes from a unique part of the world in Nelson. And, you know, we might touch on it, you may touch on it, Marie, but Nelson is not too far from Marlborough, but that slight distance actually gives some quite distinct differences in flavour and profile. And I think while both regions are fantastic in their own right, I love having that difference in the range. I love having this Nelson wine in the range from you. Because, you know, it's important to give people options, give customers different flavours, different tastes, so that they can go on a wine sort of journey, if you like. We can't travel at the moment, but wine is one way of feeling like you're reaching out to different parts of the world, and having a wine just off to the side, or not far from Marlborough, is a fantastic thing that I'm really happy that we have.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, totally agree. I mean, I think, you know, there is a danger sometimes that people just think, oh, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is just one homogenous style, but it's absolutely not that at all. I mean, Nelson is it's a much, much smaller region than Marlborough. The topography is very different. You know, we're surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. We've got Tasman Bay. So we've got quite a different climate. I mean, during the ripening season, it's maybe 3-4 degrees cooler than over in Marlborough, which tends to be a lot more exposed there on the coast. And that cooler temperature just leads to a slower build-up of flavours. So quite often people will say about a Nelson Sauvignon that it seems just a little bit more restrained in style than a Marlborough wine. So perhaps that makes it a little bit more food friendly, because essentially Sauvignon Blanc it's one of the aromatic varieties, and it's quite a big, powerful wine. But if you want a wine that's going to complement what you're eating, you don't want something that's going to overpower it too much. But I think we should taste the wines, Dan, actually. You know, we could keep talking about them. Sure. Let's taste and have a look. So I've got the 2020 here, and also the 2019, because there's still some of that in the UK market, and it's just quite interesting to see how a Sauvignon ages a little bit over a few months.
Which would you like to start with, Marie?
So I think should we do 20
Sure.
to start, and then look at the 19 after that?
Sure. Yeah, and we touched on the differences between Marlborough and Nelson, and now's the time to talk about them as we're tasting the wine. For me, the other thing that Nelson brings is they age slightly differently, and if you do get the opportunity to taste the 19 and the 20, or even 2 other vintages side by side, you can really see that difference. It's a bit hard to talk about one without having the other side by side, but Nelson definitely ages in a different way than Marlborough. Sometimes people are all about drinking Sauvignon Blanc right now. I think there's a real opportunity with these Split Rock wines and wines from Nelson to just 1 or 2 years after their release, they developed some really delicious, complex secondary flavours that you know, we have a lot of wines from Marlborough, but I just don't see that in the same way that I do from Nelson, and I think it's a real positive.
No, I agree with you, because I think, as much as, you know, one of the things that people love so much about Split Rock Sauvignon is that wonderful freshness and exuberant fruit. But, you know, you take that a year on and you've still got that lovely fruit, but it's just slightly toned down. You've lost those almost slightly aggressive, early, bright, aromatic bouquet. And it's just a little bit more toned down, a little bit more subtle. And yeah, I think, you know, it might be interesting to maybe even look at that sort of commercially as, you know, Sauvignon Blanc to age. I mean, it's nothing new in the Loire or Bordeaux or whatever to do that. So yeah, why not Nelson?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's look at the 20. So this was 2020's lockdown harvest. Totally. I mean, none of us are going to forget 2020, are we? And certainly the Seifrieds and you know, all our other wine producing at the start of harvest, which was a complete disaster. And at one point we thought that we weren't going to be able to harvest, that we wouldn't be sitting here today with a glass of 2020 Split Rock Sauvignon Blanc in front of us. So it was a very, very difficult time with all the fruit on the vines all ready to be picked. We had a team of harvest workers. We tend to, because of our Austrian German heritage, we tend to have a lot of Europeans come to do harvest. So we had all these young boys and girls at the winery a little bit scared away from home with this virus kicking off, and we were told that, you know, everybody had to down tools. But then the government announced that the harvest could carry on. So we were able to do that, and obviously that was quite difficult too, because of all the social distancing, and it's a very, very testing time. But the wonderful thing is that 2020 is an absolutely superb vintage, and I'm sure you're finding that your other producers are saying the same thing. I mean, we thought 2019 couldn't be topped, but I think quite possibly 2020 will. So yeah, we're very, very pleased.
Yeah, the two things that in speaking to other wineries that I work with and we work with in New Zealand was it was line ball as to whether wine could even get made this year. The New Zealand government has taken their lockdown restrictions incredibly seriously, and they were not going to be swayed by people's need to drink and to make wine. It was going to be the health and safety of the regions first. And so people were, in the end, quite surprised that they were able to actually pick the grapes and make the wine. And the other thing that came through was the quality of 2020. They were desperate to try and make the wine because they knew that the ripening season, the lead up to the vintage before picking, had just been perfect. So, the worst thing for a winery, a grape grower, a winemaker is to see beautiful, pristine fruit and not be able to convert it into the product that we all love. So, they were incredibly lucky. You were incredibly lucky. And it will go down as one of the best vintages coming out of New Zealand.
Totally. I mean, when you look at what happened in South Africa this year, it all could have gone so much worse. So, yeah, we are delighted. I mean, it was textbook vintage. I mean, the weather was perfect. I think 19 was a fantastic year, but there was a little less rain, so there was a bit more sort of heat stress on the vines. But 2020 we didn't have any of that at all. So uniformly, it's not a massive vintage, but the quality is way up there. And we're delighted. I mean, the response from the market has been most positive.
Yeah. No, it's delicious. I mean, as I look at this 20, it's just so fresh, which is one of the first things you want, obviously, from a fresh style aromatic wine. It's got some real crisp, snap fresh, or almost we call them snow peat here in Australia, but I think in the UK they're mange too. Is that right? Yes. I get some real the freshness is the thing that jumps out of the glass, and then it leads into classic signature passion fruit, guava, all the tropical fruits that you know and expect and want to see. But the combination of the morphing of the wine into that is spot on.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful balance, as you say. You've got all those sort of aromas on, and you've got some lovely citrus and green aromas, and then that lick of passion fruit there on the end. And there's some lovely minerality here. So this blend actually this year came from 3 of our different vineyards. So Brightwater, which is inland from the coast, very stony, so that really helps to impart some minerality to the wines. Then Rabbit Island is down near the coast, and then we have Queen Victoria Vineyard. I think that combination of grapes grown across those vineyards has achieved an absolutely fantastic wine that people should.
It's funny you say that, because the other thing that I tasted these about half an hour ago before. And then the first thing I got was apple blossom and pear. And then it struck me that you're surrounded by apple orchards. I don't know about pear, but I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but it just jumps out of the glass. And then there's the minerality that you talk of. That's for me the third part of the wine, moving from the freshness, the crispness, the fruits, the tropical fruits, into that minerality, which it's always a difficult one to explain or to talk about, minerality in a wine. But for me, it's a slight zing. There's a terrible descriptor, but it's the closest one to know, which is sort of like licking a river stone, which sounds horrible, but it really gives the wine complexity. And that's a word they use a lot in wine tasting, because that's what you want. You don't want one-dimensional, two-dimensional flavors. You want complex, multi-dimensional, and I think the 3 sections that we've talked about just work seamlessly together.
Yeah. No, that's completely agree. And it's that minerality as well that gives you that really beautiful long finish. So you have a sip, and it's just there, developing there on your back palate, and that slight sort of stoniness that comes through, and the beautifully balanced acidity.
Well done.
Have another sip. So I think we should look at the 19 now, Dan, and just see how that's developed over the last year or so. So we noticed, I think, first of all, we noticed the colour. Obviously, it's just that tiny little bit darker because it's been in bottle for longer. But again, 19 was a really good vintage. As I've said, we really thought 19 was the business. But to have had 2 fantastic years on the trot is, really, really good news.
Mm. It shows that a wine is a living, breathing thing. It shows that it's a little bit older, and older in a real positive way. Older in that it's had a little bit more time for all those flavours to just mesh and sit with each other comfortably, not try and dominate each other, but to support each other. And then it moves into where I really see the difference between Marlborough and Nelson, which is that aging difference. And then I'm picking up, quince and fig, those sort of slightly richer type fruits than your pear and your passion fruit. And that for me is a nice journey within the palate. It starts still fresh and then moves into richer, almost mince pie territory, but not fully. And that's what I just don't see with Marlborough.
Yes, I think with this 19, I mean, you're not really getting the kind of asparagus and grassiness so much, are you? It is a much sort of richer fruit palette, as you say, that the fig, the quince. That's interesting. I don't know whether in Australia do, but certainly around Nelson, the Seifried family, quite often when they serve, and that's that kind of that sort of reminds me, the Split Rock Sauvignon reminds me of that quince jelly, that lovely rich flavour.
Yeah. So you just broke up a little bit there, but I think he was talking about quince jelly and the Seifried family like that. Yes. It's also enjoyed here very much. Yeah, something to serve with cheese. So that really kind of reminds me of that now, tasting the 19 Split. Yeah, it's just that richness.
This is a lovely glass of wine still. I don't think there's a lot of it still available to sell, but some of you may well have a few bottles in your wine rack or in your fridge. So enjoy that.
Yeah. No, well done again.
Yeah, no, I think we have to sort of take our hats off to the winemakers this year, really, all over New Zealand, don't we?
Yeah. I was just thinking back, you talking about Herman and the family. The first time I met Herman, I'd heard a little bit about him because, anyway, he came out and he's a big man.
Oh, yeah.
He's a big man, but we shook hands and his hand swallowed my hand. And I thought, yes, he's a very good fellow.
Yeah, no, he's still going strong. No sign of retiring there for Herman.
I wouldn't have thought so.
So I guess we could now move on to our Pinot Noir. Shall we do that, Dan? Fancy some Pinot Noir? So this is the Nelson Bay 19. So this is a relative newcomer to the range, isn't it? This has been in for 2-3 years now, maybe?
Yeah.
So along with Sauvignon, I mean, I think pretty much it's regarded that New Zealand is the go-to country in the world now for really, really good Sauvignon Blanc. And I think we're now in there with Pinot Noir. People are feeling that, New Zealand is the perfect climate. It's cool climate. Sauvignon is a cool climate grape, so is Pinot Noir. Climatically, it's very, very well suited. And I think what we're seeing in New Zealand is you get such a much better consistency of quality with the Pinots. But, that usually comes at a fair price for, what can be a fairly lowly appellation in Burgundy. Whereas I think if you look at New Zealand, you're getting so much better value for money and consistency of style. I do also think that the Pinot, I mean, you've got lots of different styles emerging in New Zealand. I mean, I think perhaps the wines from Nelson are a little bit more restrained, a little bit more European in style. You've got then the sort of massive, big velvety styles from Otago, and then slightly more juicier fruit from Marlborough.
Yeah, I also think that there's a real, the cost for quality of Nelson is fantastic. and definitely represents better value, and that's a very important part of wine. It represents fantastic value, Nelson Pinot. There are some brilliant Pinots across the country, and they're also, some of them, incredibly expensive.
Absolutely.
I think you get a very, very good quality Pinot at a very reasonable price.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, Pinot Noir is never a cheap option, is it, wherever you go in the world, because it's a very difficult grape to grow, and you know, it needs a lot of work in the vineyard. That's exceptional value for a Pinot from Nelson. So this Pinot has come from two of our vineyards, from Brightwater again, which is the stony vineyard, which is, you know, gives some nice minerality. And the grapes ripen beautifully there because it's great big stones and they really hold the heat from the sun. And then Rabbit Island down by the coast. So it's a blend across the two. Again, as we've said, 19 was an amazing vintage. And we were delighted about that because 17 and 18 had been a bit more challenging, particularly because Pinot is one of the grapes we picked towards the end of harvest. And we had some terrible, you know, the sort of storms that get given names by the Met Office. Didn't harvest big quantities in 17 and 18, so 19 we were able to get a nice crop in, and the fruit is beautiful. I mean, you've got just gorgeous summer berry fruit there, really sort of crushed strawberries, crushed raspberries. It's gorgeous.
It's very soft and supple, which is something I look for in Pinot. And then it's also got some cracking acidity, which I think the best Pinots in the world have acidity. And acidity is not a negative, you know, sometimes that can, you know, that word can sound a bit aggressive, but the best wines in the world have high acidity levels to help them with ageability. But also it just helps the flavors. The acidity almost provides a structure and support throughout the line of the wine to allow those flavors to sort of sit and rest on. And I think it's got the acidity and then it's got the supple fruit flavors, as you say, just sitting on that nicely.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there with the acidity, Dan, because you have got some really gorgeous fruit going on here, but it needs that acidity to, otherwise, you know, if you've got something really, really fruity without acidity, it can be a little bit jammy, which is, you know, not such a nice experience. But with this, you've just got this good structure, a little bit of tannin there, and obviously the oak too. This has spent around about 9 months in oak barrels, French oak barrels. So it's very, very nicely balanced. The oak is not.
No.
Ends in very nicely and gives a really beautifully balanced glass of Pinot. So,
the oak is actually really deftly used. If you look for it, you can see it, which is how oak should be in a wine. It shouldn't slap you about the face. But if you're looking for it and trying to taste it, it's there. And they just gentle the acidity with the oak and fruit, just peter out very gently, but hold for quite a long time in the mouth.
No, I agree. I mean, you're fortunately going into summer, aren't you, over there in Australia? But we're heading into winter, and I always think Pinot Noir is the perfect sort of autumn wine with all those casseroles and obviously classic roast lamb that we have in New Zealand, and so it's a really, really lovely glass.
Yes.
Fourth wine. So we're moving into sweet wine territory now with our fourth wine, the Seifried Sweet Agnes Riesling, which again has been a big favourite with Laithwaite's customers for a good many years. The icon wine from our winery.
Yeah, I would say it's an iconic Seifried wine, but this is an iconic New Zealand wine. There are some wines that you even people who would say to me, I don't like wine, you pour them a small glass of this and you can change their mind pretty easily. It is an iconic wine. I can't remember, you may be able to tell me, Marie, how many medals over the journey of this wine it's won. It's dozens and dozens.
And I think we're on 18 trophies.
It absolutely deserves them. As I said, this is an iconic wine. And you may have noticed I've been spitting, I taste a lot of wines throughout the day, and I've been spitting these wines because I need to. I'm not going to spit the Agnes as we talk about it. It's not a wine that should be spat.
No. And, 9 times out of 10, they love it because it's not overtly sweet. It's got such fantastic acidity and all these gorgeous citrus flavors running through it. People have said to me, gosh, that's really quite refreshing, isn't it? It doesn't taste, I think, to the success of the wine, although we've got what we call residual sugar, quite high residual sugar, around about 153 grams a litre, the acidity levels are at a commensurately high level too. So you've got this absolutely beautiful, balanced experience in the glass.
No, and I think that's the key to any dessert fortified wine is balance and freshness. So it's definitely rich and has a richness and a sweetness, but they work together. It's not cloying, and it is definitely finishes. It feels like it's freshened in your mouth.
Yes.
A lot of people save dessert wines for after dinner, which is traditional and works. Personally, I like to have these beforehand because after a meal, there's been a number of different flavours all combined. This before a meal with some pate or blue cheese would just be a match made in heaven.
Yes.
Because you've not got all the other things that you've just eaten going on that can be a little bit disruptive sometimes. Just allowing this chilled with some, in warmer weather or not, with some blue cheese is one of those unbelievable food wine matches. If you haven't ever put those two things together, please try it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the French regularly drink sweet wine as an aperitif. There was a restaurant in London called Providors that was owned by Peter Gordon, who's a New Zealand celebrity chef. He's actually moved back to New Zealand now, but he regularly used to use sweet Agnes in his tasting menus at the very start of a meal, because I think sometimes you've had a lot of wine with the meal and the dessert wine comes at the end, and maybe you don't actually get to sort of fully appreciate it. But whichever, beginning or end of meal, it's a pretty good drop, isn't it? So very special. Obviously, it's named after Agnes. Ho Herman has named the dessert wine after his wife. People quite often ask that question. It's not varieties like you would see in a French Sauterne, for example, but the grapes are really dried and sort of like a natural dehydration process. So they're like raisins really when they come off the vine, and then they're cool fermented, and no oak treatment at all. And then we bottle then some months after harvest and release onto the market.
And am I right in saying that? I mean, this is a wine that sells out. I think we get what we call an allocation, so we're allowed a small amount, but this wine, demand exceeds supply because it's so iconic, not only in New Zealand, but around the world. If you could make more of this, you would, because people around the world call for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have distribution for this wine everywhere, and it's served in some of the finest restaurants in the world. I think if you have a little look at your tasting notes, we even got the chance to show the wine to Prince Charles a couple of years ago.
Oh, there he is with Chris, the winemaker.
But that was quite a cool event. He seemed to enjoy it. I've heard the royal family are quite big fans of Riesling, so I think we've probably hit the spot there with that one. So let's have a little.
I'm hoping that if you're listening to watching us talk about this wine, you need to have this wine. You need to taste this wine. As I said, it's one of New Zealand's best wines, not just from Nelson, not just from Seifried, but from New Zealand and in the world. So we're very lucky to have it. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. No, it's great to see the wine being appreciated. And I love the idea of sort of converting people who say they don't like.
Yeah.
And if people are buying this wine now in the UK, it comes with a beautiful gift pack as well. So, you know, it is perfect at this time of year. We're starting to think about Christmas. So, you know, a really great gift. But boy, it's just a fantastic glass, isn't it? Doesn't that flavour just go on and on and on? It's just, you know, there's so much going on here. This lovely sort of apricot and there's a slight nuttiness to it as well, and just layers and layers of the citrus running through it. It's delicious.
Yeah. I'm in Australia at the moment, in Melbourne, a very tightly locked down Melbourne. My wife is downstairs cooking dinner, and she'll be very happy when I take this bottle downstairs and share a glass with her. Just a glass. She'll be very happy.
Yeah, I just wanted to come on and say thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, Dan. Apologies for the drop in audio throughout. Hopefully we covered most of the subject matter. If anybody does have any questions this evening, please put them in the comments and we'll send them over to Dan and Marie and get a response to you in the coming days. Yeah, brilliant tasting, guys. Thank you ever so much for your time this evening. Thank you again.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for organising.
Thank you.
Nice to see some faces.
See you soon. Yes, absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Enjoy a sweet Agnes.